Gun owners, take note. For the first time in nearly a century, Congress has permanently blocked federal taxes on suppressors and short-barreled rifles, SBRs. This is a historic victory for Second Amendment enthusiasts, and it's being hailed as the most significant rollback of federal firearm restrictions since the National Firearms Act was first enacted in 1934. But before you celebrate too loudly, there's a critical caveat. This victory is already under threat. Anti-gun lawmakers and federal agencies are exploring ways to undermine it, and the next few months could determine whether this win stands or gets reversed. What you do now and what you understand could protect your rights and your investments in firearms. If you're watching this, subscribe and hit the notification bell immediately. You won't want to miss the developments over the coming weeks. Let's start with the facts. The National Firearms Act of 1934, commonly known as the NFA, imposed strict regulations on specific firearm categories, including suppressors and SBRs. For decades, this included a $200 transfer and manufacturing tax, which generated hundreds of millions of dollars for the federal government. This isn't just a minor adjustment. The new legislation doesn't merely reduce the tax temporarily, it permanently prohibits federal agencies from collecting these taxes again. That's right, no executive order, no agency regulation, and no appropriations bill can reinstate these taxes without entirely new legislation passing both the House and Senate and receiving the president's signature. Consider the implications. The ATF, which has relied on these taxes as a primary revenue stream, can no longer legally collect them. Since 2000, over $340 million has been generated through NFA tax stamps. Those funds and the bureaucratic structures built around them are now obsolete. Here's what this means for you as a gun owner. Number one, pending applications are now tax-free. The ATS currently holds tens of thousands of applications for suppressors and SBRs. With the law in effect immediately, every pending application is now eligible for a full tax refund. 2. Faster processing times. Without the tax to process, the ATF no longer has the administrative justification for the months-long delays many gun owners experienced. Early reports indicate processing times have collapsed dramatically from an average of 240 days to just 2 weeks in some cases. 3. Potential for new fees. While the tax is gone, the ATF is reportedly considering whether it can impose administrative processing fees to cover operational costs. While nothing has been finalized, it's important to stay vigilant. This is where understanding the legal and political landscape becomes crucial. Gun owners can no longer rely on the status quo. You must actively track legislative moves and court developments because the next few months could redefine what ownership looks like under federal law. Inside the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, chaos reigns. The NFA division, responsible for tax collection and registration, suddenly finds its mission obsolete. Hundreds of federal employees now face uncertainty, and millions of dollars in allocated budgets cannot be reprogrammed without congressional approval. This bureaucratic paralysis has consequences for you. A disrupted ATF could delay applications, enforce unclear rules, or even attempt to introduce new fees in ways that skirt the legal boundaries of the new law. The agency is in uncharted territory, and how it reacts will directly impact every gun owner who holds or plans to hold NFA-regulated items. While Congress acted decisively, the battle is far from over. 15 state attorneys general, representing states with high concentrations of suppressor ownership, have teamed up with major gun rights organizations to challenge the NFA in federal courts. The legal argument is straightforward but powerful. The original constitutional justification for the NFA rested on its status as a revenue measure. Remove the tax, and the legal foundation for the entire regulatory scheme crumbles. Some of these courts are already issuing preliminary orders that suggest judges are taking the plaintiff's arguments seriously. Federal courts typically take months to rule on complex cases, but the expedited nature of these filings shows the urgency and potential impact. If the courts side with the plaintiffs, it could result in nationwide injunctions blocking the ATF from enforcing NFA registration requirements, which would fundamentally change how suppressors and SBRs are regulated. Just 3 days after the permanent tax elimination, Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy introduced a counter-amendment. This amendment seeks to A. Raise the NFA transfer and manufacturing tax from $0 to $5,500 per item, and B. Impose a $750 annual registration fee for existing NFA items.
The numbers are staggering. For a gun owner with multiple items, this could mean tens of thousands of dollars in new federal obligations, retroactively applied. While it remains an amendment, not law, its introduction shows that anti-gun lawmakers are prepared to act quickly to reverse or undermine congressional victories. Murphy's amendment was submitted during the fiscal year 2026 appropriations process, the same mechanism used to eliminate the tax. This is a deliberate, strategic choice. By embedding the amendment in a massive spending bill, proponents hope it will pass with minimal scrutiny. History shows that last-minute provisions in large bills often slip through because members of Congress vote to avoid government shutdowns rather than debate every line. This makes understanding timing critical. Gun owners must watch both court developments and legislative processes simultaneously. Any lapse in awareness could result in sudden changes that affect ownership rights, taxes, and compliance obligations. Adding another layer of complexity is the Department of Justice. Despite Congress eliminating the tax, the DOJ is actively defending the NFA in multiple lawsuits. They argue that the law can still be justified under the Commerce Clause, general police powers, and even certain interpretations of the Second Amendment. From a practical perspective, this sets up a conflict between congressional intent and federal enforcement. Even though the law has changed, enforcement actions could continue if courts side with DOJ arguments or if federal agencies interpret the law aggressively. Gun owners must therefore be aware that legal battles are ongoing and that ownership rights are only as secure as both the courts and Congress allow them to be. Finally, there's a financial and strategic dimension to consider. The NFA registry contains detailed records on over 5 million items, including personal information about every owner. This database has been used extensively for investigations unrelated to NFA items. Eliminating the tax or challenging the registry could fundamentally alter the government's ability to maintain and use this information. However, it also raises questions about privacy, due process, and how law-abiding citizens are treated in regulatory systems. To summarize, here's what gun owners need to understand right now. 1. Congress has permanently eliminated suppressor and SBR taxes, creating an immediate and historic shift in federal law. 2. Pending applications are now tax-free and processing may accelerate, but bureaucratic uncertainty remains. 3. Legal challenges are underway that could change registration requirements nationwide. 4. Political countermeasures like Senator Murphy's amendment threaten to reintroduce extreme tax burdens. 5. Federal agencies and the DOJ may attempt to circumvent congressional intent, so vigilance is critical. 6. The NFA registry remains a critical point of both legal and financial implications for gun owners. Understanding these dynamics isn't optional, it's necessary. Over the next few weeks, the actions of Congress, the courts, and federal agencies will determine whether this victory is cemented or reversed. Stay alert, know your rights, and prepare to act if necessary. While Congress made history by permanently blocking suppressor and SBR taxes, the legal battlefield has only just begun. Across multiple federal districts, lawsuits are underway challenging the National Firearms Act's continued enforcement. 15 states, including Texas, Florida, Montana, Wyoming, and 11 others, have partnered with major gun rights organizations like Gun Owners of America and Silencer Shop to take on the federal government. The key legal argument is straightforward but devastating to the government's position. The NFA was originally upheld as a revenue-generating measure. Remove the tax permanently, and the constitutional justification disappears. Without a revenue stream, the government's claim that the NFA regulates firearms under taxing authority collapses. In short, if courts accept this argument, the entire registration system could be invalidated nationwide. 3 federal judges are currently presiding over cases with expedited motions. These judges, Judge Reed O'Connor, Northern District of Texas, Judge Matthew Kaczmarek, Western District of Texas, and Judge Catherine Kimball Micel, Middle District of Florida, have already issued preliminary orders suggesting that they are taking the plaintiffs' claims seriously. Judge O'Connor's preliminary opinion, in particular, raises critical questions. When Congress eliminates the tax that formed the NFA's constitutional basis, continued enforcement of registration requirements may constitute an ongoing constitutional violation. If the court grants preliminary injunctive relief, it could freeze ATF enforcement nationwide almost immediately.
These developments create a rare window of opportunity for gun owners. The combination of permanent tax elimination and potential court rulings means that, for the first time in decades, civilian ownership of suppressors and SBRs could exist without federal registration obligations. But this window is fragile. Any delay in court rulings or legislative countermeasures could reverse these gains. Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy introduced a counter-amendment just 72 hours after the tax was permanently blocked. This amendment is not a casual legislative proposal. It's a meticulously calculated effort to undo the historic victory through the appropriations process. Here's what Murphy's amendment proposes. 1. Transfer tax. Raise the tax from $0 to $5,500 per item. 2. Manufacturing tax. Apply $5,500 to every newly manufactured suppressor or SBR. 3. Annual registration fee. Impose a $750 recurring annual fee on all NFA items currently in civilian hands. Consider the scale. 5.2 million NFA items are registered in the U.S. today. If the $750 annual fee is applied universally, that's $3.9 billion per year extracted from gun owners solely for items they already legally own. And the $5,500 retroactive tax on each existing item could exceed tens of thousands of dollars for collectors or families with multiple items. This is not just a punitive tax. It's a strategic effort to create financial pressure that forces compliance or surrender. Many gun owners simply cannot pay tens of thousands in retroactive taxes within a 180-day window. The result, millions of items could be surrendered to the ATF for destruction, effectively achieving confiscation without legislative debate. Murphy deliberately inserted his amendment into the fiscal year 2026 appropriations bill. This is a high-stakes maneuver. Appropriations bills are massive, often exceeding 2,000 pages, and many legislators vote for them simply to avoid a government shutdown. History shows that last-minute provisions in these bills can pass with minimal scrutiny. In fact, past appropriations battles reveal that, on average, 18 Republicans break ranks during final votes, even when they oppose certain provisions publicly. Murphy's strategy relies on political pressure and urgency. He knows that many lawmakers prioritize government continuity over policy scrutiny. For gun owners, this is a warning. The fight over suppressor and SBR taxes isn't over, and the next legislative actions could directly impact ownership rights. Vigilance is essential. Tracking committee hearings, floor votes, and amendments could mean the difference between keeping your firearms and facing enormous retroactive obligations. One of the most alarming aspects of Murphy's amendment is its retroactive application. Here's how it works. Every NFA item currently in the registry could suddenly carry a $5,500 tax due within 180 days. Items not paid for within that time frame must be surrendered to the ATF for destruction. For gun owners with multiple registered items, the tax obligation could quickly escalate into five-figure amounts. This is a critical legal and constitutional question. Retroactive taxation at this scale may conflict with the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment and due process protections. But until courts weigh in, the threat exists. Gun owners must understand that retroactive proposals are not theoretical, they are politically and financially real, and failing to prepare could result in catastrophic loss. With both the permanent tax elimination and the threat of counter legislation, what should gun owners do? Here's a practical checklist. 1. Track your application status. If you have a Form 4 pending, confirm whether your application is now eligible for a refund. Stay in touch with ATF Communications and your FFL to ensure accurate processing. 2. Document everything. Copies of all receipts, Form 4 submissions, and correspondence with federal authorities. Accurate records could be vital if retroactive taxes or fees are enforced. 3. Stay legally informed. Follow the ongoing federal court cases closely. Consult a firearms attorney if you own multiple NFA items or anticipate potential retroactive obligations. 4. Participate in advocacy. Contact your representatives and senators to express support for permanent tax elimination and oppose retroactive fees. 5. Financial planning. Consider the worst-case scenario of retroactive taxes. Avoid making major NFA-related purchases without understanding potential legal or fiscal consequences. While Congress took a historic step, the Department of Justice is actively working to defend the NFA. Attorney General Pam Bondi's office has spent over $8 million in legal fees over 4 months to maintain the status quo. Their strategy involves arguing that the NFA remains constitutional under alternative legal justifications, including the Commerce Clause and general police powers. This sets up a rare clash. Congress explicitly eliminated the tax, yet DOJ enforcement positions could keep the law active in practice. This tug-of-war demonstrates that victories in Congress are not always final in practice. Gun owners must understand the dual arenas, legislative and judicial, and remain proactive. Beyond taxes, the NFA registry itself remains a critical factor. It contains detailed information about over 5.2 million items, including owner names, addresses, fingerprints, and transaction histories. This database has been leveraged for investigations unrelated to NFA items, including identifying firearm owners for general criminal investigations. Eliminating the tax or challenging the registry could limit government access to personal information while also raising serious privacy concerns. Additionally, the U.S. shares NFA registry data with 17 foreign governments under law enforcement agreements. Legal challenges that restrict federal access could have international implications. Here's what gun owners should take away from this segment. 1. Federal courts may invalidate registration requirements nationwide, but the outcome is not guaranteed. 2. Senator Murphy's amendment represents a potentially catastrophic retroactive tax and fee scheme. 3. Timing is crucial. Approaching appropriations deadlines are being exploited to force compliance. 4. Retroactive taxes could conflict with constitutional protections, but legal battles will take time. 5. Gun owners must actively monitor court cases, legislative amendments, and ATF guidance. 6. The NFA registry remains both a strategic and privacy-critical issue. Vigilance, legal awareness, and advocacy are now essential tools for every gun owner. This is no longer a matter of passive observation. Your action or inaction over the coming months could have irreversible consequences. Gun owners must be aware of what could happen if Senator Murphy's amendment passes or if the DOJ manages to maintain NFA enforcement despite the tax elimination. These are not theoretical what-ifs. They are plausible outcomes given current legislative and judicial trends. 1. Retroactive tax enforcement. If the $5,500 per item retroactive tax is applied, gun owners with multiple items could face six-figure bills in a matter of months. The $750 annual registration fee would compound the financial burden year after year, effectively turning legal ownership into a continuous cash obligation. 2. Forced surrender. Murphy's Amendment stipulates that items not paid for within 180 days must be surrendered to the ATF for destruction. For families, collectors, or enthusiasts with multiple suppressors, or SBRs, this could result in the loss of legally owned property without compensation. 3. Legal uncertainty. Even if the law is challenged in court, the process could take months or years. During this time, ATF enforcement could continue, creating a precarious environment where compliance is legally unclear. 4. Financial hardship for gun owners. Average NFA owners typically possess 2 to 3 items. A single retroactive tax could exceed the cost of the items themselves. For collectors or multi-item owners, bills could reach $50,000 to $100,000 or more, creating impossible choices for compliance. These scenarios demonstrate why proactive awareness and preparation are essential. Gun owners must treat the situation as a legal and financial emergency, not a passive political development. If a retroactive tax is enacted, gun owners will need to navigate the following complexities. 1. Timeline pressure. Retroactive tax provisions give a short 180-day compliance window. Missing this deadline triggers mandatory surrender. Planning early is critical. Understand your total exposure, review financial options, and document all existing ownership. 2. Legal challenges. Retroactive taxes are constitutionally vulnerable. The takings clause and due process protections provide potential legal grounds for defense. Owners should consult specialized firearms attorneys to understand their rights, possible injunctions, and legal filing deadlines. 3. Financial planning. Even if you intend to fight retroactive taxes, some financial preparation may be necessary to cover potential obligations. Explore escrow accounts, savings allocation, or temporary loan solutions to protect your assets. 4. Advocacy and legislative action. Contact your state and federal representatives. Lawmakers need to hear from constituents that retroactive taxation and confiscation proposals are unacceptable. Joining state and national firearm advocacy organizations strengthens collective lobbying power and legal influence. The permanent tax elimination, combined with ongoing legal and legislative battles, sets the stage for a new era of firearm regulation and ownership. Here's what to expect. Shifts in federal enforcement. If courts strike down registration requirements, gun ownership could become less regulated at the federal level for suppressors and SBRs. However, states may respond with their own regulations, creating a patchwork of laws. Gun owners must remain informed about both federal and state law. Precedent for future legislation. The success or failure of this tax battle will likely influence future firearm legislation. A permanent victory could limit federal authority to impose retroactive financial obligations on lawful firearm owners. Conversely, if Murphy's Amendment passes, it could embolden attempts to impose retroactive controls on other firearm categories. Data privacy concerns. If courts allow continued enforcement without the tax, the government may retain the NFA registry. Gun owners must consider the long-term implications of data privacy, including potential misuse of ownership information for unrelated investigations. Financial planning for owners. In an era of legal and legislative uncertainty, responsible gun owners may need to adopt long-term financial strategies to protect assets and maintain compliance. Here's a practical roadmap to navigate the evolving landscape. Confirm ownership status. Review all NFA items, ensure proper documentation, and confirm current registration status. Check if any Form 4 applications are pending and eligible for refunds due to tax elimination. Track legislative developments. Monitor Congress and state legislatures for amendments or retroactive tax proposals. Pay attention to fiscal year appropriations bills, as these are the vehicles most likely to carry hidden amendments. Monitor court decisions. Follow the progress of the 15-state coalition lawsuit and related federal cases. Track preliminary injunctions, summary judgment motions, and potential nationwide rulings. Financial readiness. Calculate potential exposure under retroactive tax proposals. Establish a financial buffer to address fees or legal costs if necessary. Engage in advocacy. Write letters, emails, and make calls to representatives expressing opposition to retroactive taxation. Support firearm advocacy organizations with membership or donations to bolster legal challenges. Legal preparedness. Retain a firearms attorney knowledgeable in NFA law and federal constitutional issues. Consider joining class action or coordinated legal challenges if retroactive taxes are implemented. Stay informed. Subscribe to alerts from reliable firearm news sources. Share information with fellow gun owners to ensure your community remains aware of potential changes. The stakes are high. The next few months could reshape the landscape of suppressor and SBR ownership in America permanently. Your vigilance and preparedness will determine whether this historic victory remains secure or slips away. This isn't just a story about taxes, it's about the broader fight for firearm rights and personal liberties. For the first time in nearly 90 years, a meaningful legislative victory has been achieved, but it is far from guaranteed. Understanding these dynamics is not optional, it is essential for protecting your property, rights, and future as a law-abiding gun owner. This is the most important moment in decades for suppressor and SBR owners. Act decisively, stay informed, and support legal and political efforts to protect your rights. This is your opportunity to ensure that history remembers this as a permanent victory, not a temporary reprieve.